Welcome to Stoic Vivu, where ancient wisdom meets modern life challenges. I'm here to share something remarkable with you today, 10 powerful practices that have helped people stay calm and centered for over 2,000 years, even during history's most chaotic periods. Think about your typical day for a moment. You wake up to notifications demanding your attention, rush through traffic while your mind races through your to-do list, navigate workplace tensions, manage family responsibilities, and try to make sense of a world that seems increasingly unpredictable. By evening, you might feel emotionally drained, mentally scattered, and wonder how others seem to handle life's pressures with such grace. Here's what most people don't realize. The tools for staying calm when life gets overwhelming aren't hidden in expensive courses or complex modern theories. They've been available for 25 centuries, tested by emperors, slaves, soldiers, and ordinary citizens who faced challenges that make our modern problems seem manageable by comparison. The ancient Stoics philosophers like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca developed these practices not in ivory towers, but in the midst of wars, political upheaval, personal tragedy, and the daily pressures of Roman society. Marcus Aurelius wrote his most profound insights while leading military campaigns on the empire's dangerous frontiers. Epictetus developed his teachings while experiencing slavery and physical disability. Seneca refined his wisdom while navigating the treacherous world of imperial politics. What makes their approach so effective is its complete focus on what you can actually control. Instead of teaching you to eliminate stress from your life, an impossible task, these practices show you how to maintain inner calm regardless of external circumstances. Instead of promising that life will become easier, they reveal how you can become more capable of handling whatever life presents. Throughout this video, you'll discover 10 specific ways to apply this ancient wisdom to your modern American life. You'll learn how to guarantee good days regardless of what others do, how to access an unbreakable part of yourself that no external force can touch, and how to transform overwhelming situations into manageable challenges through simple shifts in focus and perspective. Each practice we'll explore has been tested not just by ancient philosophers, but by millions of people throughout history who found themselves facing seemingly impossible circumstances. These aren't theoretical concepts. They're practical tools you can use immediately, whether you're dealing with a difficult boss, navigating a relationship challenge, managing financial stress, or simply trying to find peace in our constantly connected world. What I love most about these teachings is their accessibility. You don't need special training, expensive equipment, or hours of daily practice. These are approaches you can integrate seamlessly into your existing life, starting today. They work whether you're stuck in traffic, sitting in a stressful meeting, or lying awake at night worrying about tomorrow. The Stoics understood something we often forget in our quick-fix culture. True calm doesn't come from eliminating life's challenges, but from developing an unshakable foundation that remains steady regardless of external storms. Today, you'll learn how to build that foundation using wisdom that has already proven its worth across centuries and cultures. 1. How to guarantee a good day every time. You're rushing to catch the morning train, coffee in one hand, phone buzzing with work emails in the other. As you hurry down the platform, you notice an elderly woman struggling with heavy grocery bags. The train is approaching, and you have exactly 30 seconds to make a choice. You could pretend not to see her and secure your seat, or you could stop to help and risk being late to an important meeting. Here's where ancient Stoic wisdom reveals something remarkable about the nature of good days. The Roman philosopher Seneca discovered a principle that transforms how we think about daily happiness. If you want some good, get it from yourself. This isn't motivational rhetoric. It's a practical insight about where reliable satisfaction actually comes from. When you choose to help that woman with her bags, something fascinating happens inside your mind. Regardless of whether your boss appreciates your slight delay, regardless of how the rest of your day unfolds, you've created an unshakable foundation of goodness that no external circumstance can diminish. You've guaranteed yourself a good day by doing good. This principle operates completely independently from outcomes. Consider what usually determines whether you call a day good or bad. Most people base this judgment on external events. Whether traffic was light, whether colleagues were cooperative, whether plans went smoothly, and whether other people responded positively to their efforts. This approach makes your daily satisfaction dependent on factors completely outside your control. The Stoics recognized this as a recipe for chronic disappointment. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the Roman Empire during plague, war, and political crisis, wrote extensively about this insight in his personal journal, which we know today as Meditations. He understood that tying your sense of daily fulfillment to external outcomes creates an emotional roller coaster where you're always at the mercy of circumstances and other people's choices. Instead, Stoic philosophy teaches a revolutionary approach. You can guarantee a good day by focusing exclusively on the one thing that remains entirely within your power, your own character and actions. When you choose kindness over indifference, honesty over deception, patience over irritation, or courage over avoidance, you create goodness that belongs to you regardless of how others respond. Imagine you're stuck in a frustrating situation at work. Your project deadline has been moved up unexpectedly, your colleague forgot to complete their portion, and your supervisor seems stressed and demanding. In this scenario, you have zero control over the deadline, your colleague's reliability, or your supervisor's emotional state. However, you have complete control over how you respond to these circumstances. You could choose to approach the situation with professionalism and a problem-solving focus. You could offer constructive solutions rather than complaints. You could maintain your integrity even when others around you might be cutting corners due to pressure. You could treat everyone involved with respect, despite feeling frustrated. These choices create good within the situation, independent of whether the project succeeds or fails. This approach works because it aligns with how human psychology actually functions. When you act in accordance with your deepest values, when you choose virtue over convenience, you experience what psychologists call intrinsic satisfaction. This type of fulfillment doesn't depend on external validation or successful outcomes. It comes from the alignment between your actions and your character. Seneca, who was one of Rome's wealthiest citizens and advisor to Emperor Nero, understood this principle from direct experience. Despite having access to every external pleasure and comfort imaginable, he discovered that his most satisfying days were those when he acted with wisdom, justice, courage, and self-discipline. His letters to his friend Lucilius repeatedly emphasized that virtue is the only reliable source of lasting contentment. The practical application of this wisdom in modern American life is straightforward but profound. Every day presents multiple opportunities to choose good actions. Listening attentively when someone needs to talk, keeping commitments even when it's inconvenient, treating service workers with respect, admitting mistakes honestly, or helping someone who's struggling. These actions don't require grand gestures or life-changing decisions. They're available in ordinary moments throughout your day. When you're in line at the grocery store, you can choose patience over irritation. When someone cuts you off in traffic, you can choose understanding over anger. When a friend shares good news, you can choose genuine celebration over envy. The beauty of this approach is its reliability. External circumstances will always be unpredictable. Other people will always have their own priorities and limitations. Projects will sometimes fail despite your best efforts. However, your capacity to choose good actions remains constant regardless of these variables. Epictetus, who experienced slavery and physical disability, taught that this inner freedom represents the one aspect of human existence that cannot be taken away by any external force. He emphasized that even in the most constraining circumstances, you retain the power to respond with dignity, wisdom, and virtue. Therefore, when you wake up tomorrow morning, you hold the key to guaranteeing yourself a good day. Before checking your phone, before learning what challenges await, before discovering how others might treat you, you can decide to approach the day with a commitment to acting well. This commitment creates goodness that belongs entirely to you, transforming how you experience whatever circumstances arise. 2. Your one job that never changes. You walk into your office on Monday morning to discover that your company is restructuring. Your department is being merged with another team, your role is changing dramatically, and the colleague you've worked closely with for 3 years is being transferred to a different division. Around you, people are expressing frustration, anxiety, and resentment about decisions made by executives they've never met. In this moment of organizational chaos, you face a fundamental choice that the Stoic philosophers understood as the cornerstone of human dignity. While everyone around you focuses on what others are doing wrong, what the company should have done differently, or how unfairly they're being treated, you have the opportunity to focus on the one responsibility that never changes regardless of circumstances. Marcus Aurelius captured this principle perfectly when he wrote in his personal meditations, "My job is to be good, just as gold must be gold, just as purple must be purple." This wasn't abstract philosophy for him. He was writing these words while managing an empire during plague, barbarian invasions, and internal political threats. He understood that regardless of external chaos, he had one constant responsibility that no external force could modify or eliminate. Your one job that never changes is to be the person that philosophy and virtue intended you to become. This means maintaining your character regardless of how others behave, staying true to your principles regardless of external pressures, and responding to every situation with integrity regardless of whether others reciprocate. This concept becomes clearer when you understand what it doesn't mean. Your job is not to control how others respond to the restructuring. Your job is not to make everyone feel better about the changes. Your job is not to prevent the company from making decisions you disagree with. Your job is not to ensure that outcomes align with your preferences. These responsibilities belong to other people or to circumstances beyond anyone's control. Consider what happens when you focus on other people's jobs instead of your own. You might spend your energy criticizing the executive's communication style, analyzing whether the restructuring makes strategic sense, or trying to convince colleagues to adopt your perspective on the changes. All of this effort is directed toward things that are not your responsibility and not within your control. Epictetus, who taught philosophy in Rome after gaining freedom from slavery, emphasized that this confusion about responsibilities is the source of most human suffering. When you take on jobs that don't belong to you, you inevitably experience frustration because you're trying to control things that are fundamentally outside your influence. Visualize yourself in a different scenario. You're at a family gathering where relatives begin discussing politics, and the conversation quickly becomes heated. Your uncle makes statements you find offensive, your cousin responds with equally inflammatory comments, and the atmosphere becomes tense and uncomfortable. Everyone seems to expect you to take sides or contribute your own political opinions. In this situation, most people instinctively focus on jobs that don't belong to them. Changing their uncle's political views, moderating the family discussion, or ensuring that everyone gets along harmoniously. These are not your responsibilities, and attempting to fulfill them will likely increase rather than decrease the family tension. Your actual job in this scenario is to respond with the character you want to embody. You can choose to speak respectfully even when others don't. You can choose to listen thoughtfully even when you disagree strongly. You can choose to redirect the conversation constructively rather than adding fuel to the conflict. You can choose to maintain your own integrity regardless of how others behave. This approach doesn't mean becoming passive or disengaged. Seneca, who served as advisor to Emperor Nero and was actively involved in Roman politics, demonstrated that focusing on your character job often requires decisive action. However, the action comes from a clear understanding of what belongs to you versus what belongs to others. When you focus consistently on your one unchanging job, something remarkable happens to your experience of stressful situations. Instead of feeling victimized by circumstances or other people's choices, you feel empowered because you're directing your energy towards something you can actually influence. Instead of feeling scattered across multiple concerns, you feel focused because you have clear priorities. The practical application of this wisdom requires developing what the Stoics called the discipline of desire, the ability to want only what is truly within your control. This means releasing your attachment to specific outcomes while increasing your commitment to acting well regardless of results. In the workplace restructuring scenario, this might mean approaching the changes with curiosity rather than resistance, treating new colleagues with the same professionalism you'd want to receive, and maintaining your work standards regardless of how others adapt to the transition. Your job is not to make the restructuring successful, but to be the kind of person who responds to change with grace and integrity. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that his purpose was to wake up each morning and work with other human beings, accepting that some would be difficult, some would be unreasonable, and some would be actively harmful. His job was not to change these people, but to remember that he was designed to work with them and to fulfill his role with virtue regardless of how they fulfilled theirs. Consequently, when you feel overwhelmed by circumstances, other people's behavior, or the apparent unfairness of situations, return to this fundamental question: what is my job in this moment? The answer will always point you toward your character, your choices, and your response. The one job that never changes and never depends on anyone else's cooperation. 3. The unbreakable part of you they can't touch. You're sitting in your manager's office, listening to harsh criticism about a project you poured months of effort into. The words feel personal and unfair, delivered in a tone that suggests your professional competence is questionable. Your heart pounds, your face flushes, and part of you wants to defend yourself aggressively or simply walk out. In this moment of feeling attacked and powerless, Ancient Stoic wisdom reveals something extraordinary about human nature that can transform your experience completely. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who understood powerlessness more intimately than most, taught a principle that has liberated people from mental suffering for over 2,000 years. Born into slavery in the Roman Empire, he experienced physical abuse that left him permanently disabled. Yet he discovered something remarkable. You can bind up my leg, but not even Zeus has the power to break my freedom of choice. This statement reveals the most important distinction in human psychology: the difference between what can be done to you and what cannot be touched by any external force. Your manager can criticize your work, question your methods, even terminate your employment, but there exists within you something completely beyond their reach. Your power to choose how you interpret, respond to, and learn from this experience. Understanding this concept requires recognizing that you are not your circumstances, your reputation, your job title, or even your physical condition. These external elements can be influenced, damaged, or taken away by forces beyond your control. However, the core of who you are, your faculty of choice, your ability to reason, your capacity to decide what story you tell yourself about events remains entirely within your domain. Consider how this applies to the criticism scenario. Your manager's words cannot directly create emotions within you. They cannot force you to feel humiliated, angry, or defeated. What creates these emotional experiences is the story you choose to tell yourself about what their criticism means. If you choose to interpret their feedback as evidence that you're professionally inadequate, you'll experience shame and anxiety. If you choose to interpret it as valuable information about how to improve, you'll experience curiosity and motivation. This distinction becomes clearer when you examine what actually happens during difficult conversations. The other person speaks words, which are simply sounds that travel through air and reach your ears. Your brain processes these sounds and assigns meaning to them based on your interpretations, past experiences, and chosen perspectives. The emotional impact comes not from the words themselves, but from the meaning you decide they carry. Epictetus demonstrated this principle through his own life circumstances. When his leg was broken by his master, he could have chosen to interpret this experience as evidence of his worthlessness, proof that life was inherently unfair, or justification for bitterness and resentment. Instead, he chose to see it as confirmation that while external forces could harm his body, they could not touch his essential freedom to think, choose, and respond according to his own values. Visualize yourself in a different challenging situation. You're scrolling through social media and discover that people you considered friends have been discussing your personal situation behind your back, sharing judgments and criticisms you find hurtful and inaccurate. Your initial reaction might be anger, betrayal, or embarrassment about what others think of you. In this moment, you can recognize that while these people can talk about you, form opinions about you, and even influence how others perceive you, they cannot touch the essential core of who you are. Their opinions exist in their minds, not in reality. Their judgments reflect their perspectives, not the objective truth about your character or worth. The practical power of this understanding becomes evident when you realize that most of your daily stress comes from feeling at the mercy of external forces. You worry about what others think because you believe their opinions can genuinely harm you. You feel anxious about outcomes because you believe your well-being depends entirely on results. You experience frustration with difficult people because you believe they have the power to ruin your day. Marcus Aurelius, who faced criticism, betrayal, and opposition throughout his reign as Roman emperor, regularly reminded himself that others could affect his body, his reputation, and his external circumstances, but they could never force him to abandon his principles, compromise his character, or lose his essential dignity. This recognition allowed him to respond to even the most challenging political situations with composure and wisdom. Seneca taught a practical exercise for developing this understanding. He suggested regularly reflecting on the difference between what belongs to you and what belongs to others. Other people's opinions belong to them. Your reputation belongs partially to others' perceptions. Your job belongs partially to your employer's decisions. However, your thoughts, your interpretations, your values, and your chosen responses belong entirely to you. When you internalize this distinction, criticism becomes feedback rather than an attack. Rejection becomes redirection rather than personal failure. Conflict becomes an opportunity for practicing virtue rather than evidence of others' power over your emotional state. Setbacks become information rather than a catastrophe. Therefore, the next time you feel overwhelmed by external pressures, remember that there exists within you an unbreakable fortress that no person, circumstance, or event can penetrate. Your freedom of choice, your power to interpret, and your ability to respond according to your values remain completely intact regardless of what others do or say. 4. Why fighting change always backfires. You receive a text message that changes everything. Your landlord is selling the apartment building where you've lived contentedly for 5 years, and you have 60 days to find a new place. Your initial reaction is a surge of anger and resistance. This wasn't supposed to happen. You had plans, routines, and a sense of stability that now feels shattered. Your mind immediately begins fighting the reality of the situation, searching for ways to prevent, delay, or reverse this unwanted change. This natural human response to unwanted change demonstrates why the ancient Stoics spent considerable time studying what they called the physics of existence, not atoms and molecules, but the fundamental principles governing how life actually operates. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his personal journal during military campaigns on the Roman frontier, observed something profound about the nature of reality that most people miss completely. He wrote, "Meditate often on the swiftness with which all that exists is swept away and carried off. Substance is like a river's unending flow, constantly changing, and causes a shift infinitely, so that nothing stands still." This wasn't philosophical poetry. It was a practical recognition of life's most fundamental characteristic that determines whether you experience peace or constant frustration. Understanding why fighting change always backfires requires grasping what change actually represents in the structure of reality. Change isn't an unfortunate disruption of normal life. Change is normal life. The Stoics, borrowing from the earlier philosopher Heraclitus, understood that stability is actually an illusion, while flux and transformation represent the true nature of existence. Consider what happens when you resist the apartment situation. Your energy goes toward trying to maintain something that no longer exists, your previous living arrangement. You might spend hours researching tenant rights, arguing with the landlord, or simply feeling angry about the unfairness of the situation. All of this effort is directed against reality itself, which is why it produces stress rather than solutions. The Stoics recognized that this resistance to change operates like swimming against a powerful river current. You exhaust yourself fighting the flow while making minimal progress toward your actual destination. Meanwhile, the current continues regardless of your resistance, often carrying you further from where you want to be. Marcus Aurelius used the river metaphor deliberately because it illustrates something crucial about the relationship between change and good outcomes. Rivers create fertile valleys, carve magnificent canyons, and provide the water necessary for all life. The destructive power people fear in rivers is actually creative power that produces beauty and sustenance over time. Imagine yourself in a different scenario that demonstrates this principle more clearly. You've been working in the same department for 3 years when your company announces a major reorganization. Your comfortable role is being eliminated, and you're being transferred to a division that handles completely different responsibilities. Your initial response might be anxiety about learning new skills, frustration about leaving familiar colleagues, or resentment about decisions made without consulting you. Fighting this change would involve trying to preserve what no longer exists, your previous role and routine. You might spend energy complaining about the reorganization, attempting to negotiate exceptions, or simply feeling resistant to embracing the new responsibilities. This approach keeps you anchored to a version of your career that has already ended while preventing you from discovering what the new situation might offer. The Stoic approach recognizes that every change, even unwanted change, creates new possibilities that didn't exist before. The apartment situation, while initially disruptive, opens opportunities to find a better living situation, explore different neighborhoods, or discover that you're ready for a different type of housing entirely. The job change, while initially uncomfortable, might introduce you to skills you didn't know you possessed, colleagues who become important relationships, or career directions you hadn't previously considered. Epictetus taught his students to distinguish between what is happening and their judgment about what is happening. The apartment sale is a factual event. Your interpretation that this change is inherently bad, unfair, or problematic is a separate mental process that you control completely. When you change your interpretation from "this shouldn't be happening" to "this is what's happening now," you free up mental energy to focus on adaptation rather than resistance. This shift in perspective requires understanding that fighting change doesn't actually protect you from change. It simply makes you experience change as suffering rather than growth. The apartment situation will unfold regardless of your emotional response to it. The job reorganization will proceed whether you embrace it enthusiastically or resist it bitterly. Your energy can go toward fighting reality or toward adapting skillfully to new circumstances. Seneca, who experienced dramatic changes in fortune throughout his life, developed a practical approach for working with change rather than against it. He suggested viewing each change as information about what the universe is asking from you next. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What is this change making possible that wasn't possible before?" Building on this understanding, the next time you encounter unwanted change, remember that you have two choices. You can spend your energy trying to preserve what no longer exists, or you can direct that same energy toward discovering what wants to emerge from the new situation. One approach leads to exhaustion and frustration. The other leads to growth and often to outcomes better than what you originally planned. 5. The superpower you use every day. You're in a heated meeting where tensions are running high. Your colleague is criticizing a decision you supported, using increasingly aggressive language that feels personal and unfair. The room falls silent, and everyone's eyes turn to you, waiting for your response. Your heart rate accelerates, your jaw tightens, and words of retaliation form in your mind. In this pivotal moment, you possess access to what the ancient Stoics considered one of humanity's most powerful abilities. Yet most people never recognize they're using it. The superpower you wield every single day is your capacity for strategic silence. This isn't the silence of weakness, confusion, or intimidation. This is the deliberate, conscious choice to pause before speaking, creating space between stimulus and response that allows wisdom to emerge instead of an impulsive reaction. The Stoic philosophers understood that speech represents one of the few human activities that is completely within our control, yet most people surrender this control without realizing it. When someone criticizes you, your immediate impulse might be to defend yourself. When someone shares exciting news, you might feel compelled to respond immediately. When someone asks your opinion, you might rush to fill the silence with whatever thoughts first come to mind. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, captured this principle with elegant simplicity. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. This mathematical ratio reflects a profound understanding of how wisdom actually develops. Information comes through listening, while understanding deepens through reflection, but both processes require the space that only silence can provide. Consider what happens in your brain during the heated meeting scenario when you choose silence instead of an immediate reaction. Your initial emotional response begins to settle, allowing your rational mind to assess the situation more clearly. You start noticing details you missed while your defensive mechanisms were activated. Perhaps your colleague's aggression stems from stress about their own performance, or maybe their criticism contains valid points wrapped in poor delivery. This pause creates what psychologists call cognitive flexibility, the ability to consider multiple perspectives and response options instead of defaulting to your first impulse. Within seconds of choosing silence, you gain access to responses that weren't available when your emotions were driving your decision-making process. The practical power of strategic silence becomes evident when you understand what usually happens when people speak too quickly. Impulsive responses often reveal more about your emotional state than they do about the situation at hand. They frequently escalate conflicts rather than resolving them. They can damage relationships, reveal information you hadn't intended to share, or commit you to positions you haven't fully considered. Epictetus taught his students that every word you speak creates consequences that extend far beyond the immediate conversation. In the meeting scenario, a defensive response might successfully rebut your colleague's criticism, but it could also create ongoing tension that affects team dynamics for weeks. An aggressive counterattack might temporarily satisfy your ego, but it could damage your professional relationships and reputation permanently. Visualize yourself in a different situation that demonstrates this principle more subtly. You're at a social gathering when someone makes a political comment that contradicts your strongly held beliefs. Your immediate impulse might be to correct their misinformation, challenge their logic, or share your opposing viewpoint. The urge to speak feels almost physical, as if remaining silent would be dishonest or cowardly. Strategic silence in this scenario doesn't mean you have no opinions or that you're avoiding important conversations. Instead, it means you're choosing when, how, and whether to engage based on wisdom rather than impulse. During the silence, you might realize that this isn't the appropriate setting for a political debate, that the other person isn't genuinely interested in dialogue, or that your emotional state would prevent you from representing your views thoughtfully. Marcus Aurelius, who participated in countless political discussions and military strategy sessions throughout his reign, regularly reminded himself that silence often communicates more effectively than speech. When advisors presented conflicting recommendations, when senators argued passionately for different policies, or when generals disagreed about military tactics, his capacity to listen completely before responding allowed him to make decisions based on a comprehensive understanding rather than partial information. The Stoics also recognized that silence serves as a filter for the quality of your eventual speech. When you pause before responding, your mind naturally begins sorting through possible responses, discarding those that are irrelevant, unhelpful, or potentially harmful. The thoughts that survive this internal filtering process are typically more accurate, more constructive, and more likely to produce positive outcomes. Seneca taught a practical exercise for developing this superpower. Before speaking in any situation, ask yourself 3 questions. Is what I'm about to say true? Is it helpful? Is it necessary? If the answer to any of these questions is no, choose silence instead. This simple practice transforms your speech from an automatic reaction into a conscious choice. Therefore, the next time you feel the urge to respond immediately to criticism, defend yourself against perceived attacks, or fill uncomfortable silences with words, remember that you're wielding one of humanity's most powerful tools. Strategic silence creates space for wisdom, prevents unnecessary conflicts, and often communicates more effectively than even the most carefully chosen words. 6. How to become truly invincible. You're scrolling through your phone before bed when you see a news alert about economic uncertainty that sends your mind spiraling into worry about your job security. Within minutes, you're mentally rehearsing worst-case scenarios about layoffs, calculating how long your savings might last, and feeling your heart rate increase as anxiety floods your system. Your phone buzzes with a work email marked urgent, then a text from a friend sharing relationship drama, followed by a social media notification showing someone's seemingly perfect vacation photos that make your own life feel inadequate by comparison. In this moment, you're experiencing what the Stoics identified as the fundamental source of human suffering, allowing your inner peace to depend on external circumstances that you cannot control. However, ancient wisdom reveals a path to genuine invincibility that doesn't require changing your external situation at all. Epictetus, drawing from decades of teaching students who faced everything from political persecution to personal tragedy, defined true invincibility with remarkable precision. Who is invincible? The one who cannot be upset by anything outside their reasoned choice. This definition revolutionizes how we understand strength, resilience, and personal power. Most people think of invincibility as the ability to prevent bad things from happening to them. They imagine that truly strong people have enough money to weather financial storms, enough social connections to avoid professional setbacks, or enough control over their environment to minimize unexpected challenges. This approach to invincibility requires constantly managing external variables, which is both exhausting and ultimately impossible. The Stoic understanding of invincibility operates on completely different principles. Instead of trying to control external circumstances, you become invincible by developing complete immunity to being emotionally destabilized by things outside your direct influence. This means that economic uncertainty cannot create anxiety within you, other people's opinions cannot damage your self-worth, and unexpected challenges cannot overwhelm your mental equilibrium. Understanding this concept requires grasping the distinction between what Epictetus called what is up to us and what is not up to us. This isn't a philosophical abstraction. It's a practical tool for determining where to direct your mental energy. The economic situation you read about in the news is not up to you. Your employer's financial decisions are not up to you. Other people's relationship problems are not up to you. However, your response to economic news, your preparation for various career scenarios, and your choice about how much mental energy to spend on others' personal drama are entirely up to you. Consider what happens when you apply this distinction to the phone scrolling scenario. The news about economic uncertainty is simply information about external conditions. Your anxiety about this information is an internal response that you control completely. The work email marked urgent represents someone else's priorities and timeline. Your decision about when and how to respond reflects your own professional judgment. Your friend's relationship drama belongs to your friend. Your choice about how much emotional energy to invest in their situation belongs to you. This approach to invincibility requires developing what the Stoics called the discipline of desire, training yourself to want only what is genuinely within your control. Most people desire outcomes. They want their investments to perform well, their relationships to be harmonious, their health to remain stable, and their careers to progress smoothly. Since these outcomes depend partially on external factors, desiring them creates vulnerability to disappointment and anxiety. Marcus Aurelius demonstrated this principle throughout his reign as Roman emperor. He faced the plague that killed millions of his citizens, barbarian invasions that threatened the empire's survival, political betrayals by trusted advisors, and personal tragedies, including the death of multiple children. Yet his personal writings reveal someone who maintained inner stability because he focused exclusively on his own character and responses rather than trying to control external events. Visualize yourself applying this wisdom to a different challenging situation. You discover that a colleague has been sharing negative opinions about your work performance with other team members, potentially damaging your professional reputation. Your initial response might be anger about their behavior, worry about how this affects others' perceptions of you, or frustration about the unfairness of the situation. True invincibility in this scenario doesn't require stopping your colleague's behavior, changing others' opinions, or even defending your reputation directly. Instead, it means maintaining your focus on what genuinely belongs to you: the quality of your actual work, the professionalism of your interactions, and the integrity of your response to this situation. When you direct your energy exclusively toward these controllable elements, your colleagues' opinions lose their power to disturb your inner equilibrium. The practical development of this invincibility requires daily practice in distinguishing between your legitimate concerns and external circumstances that you cannot influence. Each time you notice anxiety, frustration, or emotional overwhelm, ask yourself, is this feeling coming from something I can actually control, or from something outside my influence? This simple question redirects your attention from external circumstances back to your own choices and responses. Seneca taught that this approach to invincibility creates a paradoxical result. When you stop trying to control external outcomes, you often become more effective at influencing them positively. Your energy goes towards skillful action rather than worried speculation. Your responses become more thoughtful because they're not driven by emotional reactivity. Your relationships improve because you're not constantly trying to manage other people's behavior and opinions. In essence, true invincibility comes from recognizing that your peace of mind, self-worth, and inner stability never needed to depend on external circumstances in the first place. When you fully internalize this understanding, you become genuinely unshakable, not because nothing bad ever happens to you, but because external events lose their power to destabilize your essential well-being. 7. The secret connection that changes everything. You're standing in line at a busy coffee shop during the morning rush, already running late for work, when you notice the customer ahead of you becoming increasingly agitated with the barista. The barista, who appears to be new and overwhelmed, is struggling to operate the espresso machine while a growing line of impatient customers checks their phones and sighs audibly. The frustrated customer begins raising their voice, criticizing the service, and demanding to speak with a manager, creating an uncomfortable tension that ripples through the entire space. In this ordinary moment, you're witnessing something the ancient Stoics understood as one of the most profound truths about human existence. A principle that completely transforms how you experience both your own well-being and your role in the world around you. Marcus Aurelius captured this insight with a simple but revolutionary statement. What isn't good for the hive isn't good for the bee. This isn't merely a pleasant metaphor about cooperation. It reveals a fundamental interconnectedness that operates whether you recognize it or not, influencing your daily experience in ways that most people never consider. Understanding this connection changes everything about how you approach challenging situations, difficult relationships, and even your own personal goals and desires. The Stoics observed that individual human flourishing and collective human flourishing are not separate phenomena competing for limited resources. Instead, they represent two aspects of the same underlying reality. When you act in ways that genuinely benefit the broader community, you simultaneously create conditions that support your own long-term well-being. Conversely, when you pursue personal advantage at the expense of others, you ultimately undermine the very social fabric that makes your own prosperity possible. Consider what this means in the coffee shop scenario. You could choose to join the chorus of frustrated customers, adding your own complaints about the slow service and inexperienced barista. This approach might temporarily satisfy your immediate desire to express frustration, but it contributes to an environment that becomes more stressful for everyone present, including yourself. Alternatively, you could recognize that the collective well-being of everyone in that space, customers, barista, and manager, directly affects your own experience of the situation. When you choose patience over impatience, understanding over criticism, or even active helpfulness over passive complaint, you contribute to creating an atmosphere that actually serves your own interest in having a pleasant morning interaction. This principle operates on multiple levels simultaneously. At the immediate level, your choice to respond constructively rather than adding to the tension makes your own coffee shop experience more positive. At the social level, your behavior models a different way of handling frustration that might influence how others respond to similar situations. At the psychological level, choosing kindness over irritation reinforces neural pathways that make you more likely to experience calm and satisfaction throughout your day. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about this interconnectedness because he governed an empire where individual and collective interests were constantly in tension. He understood that policies that appeared to benefit Rome at the expense of individual citizens ultimately weakened the empire, while decisions that genuinely served individual flourishing strengthened the collective social structure that made Roman prosperity possible. The practical application of this wisdom requires recognizing that your well-being is not separate from the well-being of the people around you, your family members, colleagues, neighbors, and even strangers you encounter throughout your day. This doesn't mean sacrificing your legitimate needs for others' preferences, but rather understanding that your deepest needs are often best served by contributing to environments where everyone can thrive. Imagine yourself in a workplace scenario that illustrates this principle more clearly. Your department is under pressure to complete a major project with an unrealistic deadline. You could choose to focus exclusively on protecting your own reputation by ensuring your individual contributions are completed perfectly, even if this means withholding information or resources that might help struggling colleagues meet their own deadlines. This approach might temporarily protect your standing with supervisors, but it contributes to a team dynamic where collaboration breaks down under pressure. Over time, this creates a work environment that becomes more stressful and less effective for everyone, including yourself. Projects become more difficult, workplace relationships deteriorate, and the overall atmosphere becomes one where individual success requires constant vigilance against potential threats from colleagues. Alternatively, you could recognize that your long-term professional success depends on working within teams that function effectively under pressure. When you share information generously, offer assistance to struggling colleagues, and prioritize collective success alongside individual achievement, you contribute to creating a work environment that better serves everyone's professional interests, including your own. Seneca, who balanced enormous personal wealth with philosophical wisdom, understood this principle through direct experience in Roman business and politics. He observed that the most sustainable prosperity comes from participating in economic and social systems where widespread flourishing is possible, rather than trying to extract maximum individual advantage from systems that create widespread suffering or instability. Therefore, the next time you face a choice between immediate personal advantage and contributing to collective well-being, remember that these options are not actually in conflict. Your deepest and most lasting personal satisfaction comes from participating in communities, relationships, and social structures where genuine mutual flourishing is possible. What serves the hive ultimately serves the bee, and what serves the bee, when properly understood, serves the hive. 8. The focus that solves any problem. You're lying awake at 3 in the morning, your mind cycling through an overwhelming cascade of concerns that feel impossibly large and interconnected. Your aging parents need more support, but you're already stretched thin between work demands and your own family responsibilities. Your mortgage payment is increasing just as inflation makes everything more expensive. Your teenager is struggling academically and socially, requiring attention you're not sure how to provide. Climate change threatens your coastal community's future. Political divisions strain relationships with people you care about. Each problem seems to amplify the others, creating a mental spiral that makes sleep impossible and tomorrow feel unmanageable. This experience of being overwhelmed by life's complexity demonstrates why Marcus Aurelius developed what might be the most practical psychological tool in all of Stoic philosophy. Writing during military campaigns where he faced similarly overwhelming challenges, plague ravaging his empire, barbarian armies threatening multiple frontiers, political conspiracies undermining his authority, and personal losses that included the death of several children, he discovered a type of focus that transforms impossible situations into manageable realities. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Don't let your reflection on the whole course of life crush you. Don't mentally picture all the various troubles which you are likely to encounter in life, but as each one occurs, ask, what is there in this that is unbearable or beyond endurance?" This insight reveals something fundamental about how human consciousness actually works and why certain types of thinking create suffering while others create clarity and effective action. The focus that solves any problem operates by recognizing that you never actually deal with all your problems simultaneously. Despite how it feels when you're lying awake at night, you only ever encounter one specific situation at one specific moment. Your mind's ability to project into multiple possible futures and hold numerous concerns simultaneously is actually creating a psychological experience that doesn't correspond to reality. Understanding this principle requires grasping the difference between problems as they exist in your mind and problems as they actually occur in your lived experience. In your mind, your parents' aging, your financial pressures, your teenagers' struggles, environmental concerns, and political tensions all demand attention at the same time, creating a sense of being overwhelmed that feels completely justified. In reality, you encounter these challenges one specific instance at a time, one conversation with your parents, one budget decision, one interaction with your teenager, one news article, one political discussion. When you apply this laser-like focus to any individual challenge, something remarkable happens to your experience of its manageability. Consider what occurs when you stop thinking about your teenager's overall academic and social struggles, and instead focus exclusively on this evening's homework situation. The global nature of their challenges, your worries about their future, and your analysis of what might have caused their difficulties all fade into the background. What remains is a specific person needing specific help with specific assignments that you can either provide or help them find elsewhere. This shift from broad overwhelm to narrow focus doesn't minimize the importance of your concerns or suggest that bigger picture thinking is worthless. Instead, it recognizes that effective action always happens in specific moments with specific opportunities, while broad overwhelm typically produces anxiety without generating useful solutions. Marcus Aurelius practiced this approach daily throughout his reign, facing challenges that would overwhelm most people if considered simultaneously. Rather than trying to solve the plague, barbarian invasions, political conspiracies, and personal tragedies all at once, he focused intensely on whatever specific decision or action was actually available to him in each present moment. This allowed him to respond effectively to immediate opportunities while avoiding the paralysis that comes from feeling responsible for solving everything simultaneously. The practical application of this focus requires developing what you might think of as selective attention, the ability to consciously narrow your awareness to what is actually happening right now rather than what might happen or what has happened. When financial anxiety begins spiraling into catastrophic thinking about potential job loss, housing costs, and retirement security, you can redirect your attention to the specific financial decision that's actually available today. This month's budget, this week's spending choices, or this afternoon's conversation with your financial advisor. Seneca taught his students a practical exercise for developing this type of focus. When feeling overwhelmed by multiple concerns, he suggested writing down each worry and then asking whether it requires action today. Most concerns that create mental overwhelm are either about situations you cannot influence directly or about potential future scenarios that may never occur. The few concerns that actually require today's attention become your immediate focus, while everything else can be set aside without guilt or neglect. Epictetus demonstrated this principle by teaching students to distinguish between impressions and judgments. The impression that your life contains multiple challenges is accurate. The judgment that you must solve all these challenges simultaneously in order to be okay is optional and typically counterproductive. Building on this understanding, the next time you feel crushed by life's apparent complexity, remember that you only ever live one moment at a time, encounter one situation at a time, and have one set of choices available at a time. This present moment focus doesn't eliminate your broader challenges, but it makes them manageable by allowing you to engage with them as they actually occur rather than as your mind imagines them occurring all at once. 9. How to enjoy life without needing anything. You're browsing through social media when you see a friend's photos from their luxury vacation in Europe, complete with 5-star hotels, gourmet meals, and breathtaking landscapes. Almost immediately, you feel a familiar pang of dissatisfaction with your own upcoming weekend plans, which involve staying home, catching up on household tasks, and maybe watching a movie. Your contentment with your life suddenly feels conditional on experiences you don't have, possessions you can't afford, and opportunities that seem out of reach. This common experience reveals one of the most liberating insights from Stoic philosophy, one that challenges everything our consumer culture teaches about happiness and fulfillment. Seneca, who was among the wealthiest men in the Roman Empire while simultaneously being one of its most profound philosophers, discovered a principle that revolutionizes how we understand the relationship between external circumstances and inner satisfaction. Seneca wrote, "Philosophy calls for simple living, but not for penance. It's quite possible to be simple without being crude." This statement contains layers of wisdom that most people miss because they misunderstand what simple living actually means in Stoic philosophy. It doesn't mean rejecting all pleasures, living in deliberate deprivation, or viewing material comfort as inherently corrupting. Instead, it means learning to enjoy whatever circumstances you encounter without making your happiness dependent on any particular external condition. Understanding this distinction requires recognizing the difference between enjoyment and need. When you enjoy your friends' vacation photos because they share beautiful experiences, that's appreciation without attachment. When viewing those photos makes you feel that your own life is inadequate until you can afford similar experiences, that's dependency creating suffering. The photos themselves are neutral. Your relationship to them determines whether they enhance or diminish your current satisfaction. Consider what happens psychologically when you need specific circumstances in order to be happy. Your contentment becomes hostage to factors largely outside your control. Your income level, other people's choices, economic conditions, health situations, or social opportunities. This creates a constant underlying anxiety because your well-being depends on maintaining or acquiring things that could be lost, delayed, or denied at any time. The Stoic approach to enjoyment operates on completely different principles. Instead of needing particular experiences in order to be satisfied, you develop the capacity to find genuine pleasure and meaning in whatever circumstances actually exist. This doesn't mean settling for less or abandoning preferences and goals. It means cultivating the ability to be fully present and appreciative regardless of whether your current situation matches your ideal preferences. Visualize yourself applying this wisdom to a different scenario that illustrates the principle more clearly. You're at a restaurant with friends when someone orders an expensive wine that you can't afford. Your initial reaction might be envy about their financial freedom, self-consciousness about your own budget limitations, or resentment about economic inequality that makes such experiences inaccessible to you. Simple living in this situation means fully enjoying whatever you choose to drink, whether it's water, coffee, or a modestly priced beverage, without making your enjoyment of the evening conditional on being able to afford the expensive wine. You can appreciate your friend's pleasure in their choice without needing to match their consumption in order to have an equally satisfying experience. This approach requires understanding that pleasure and satisfaction come primarily from your quality of attention and appreciation rather than from the objective qualities of what you're experiencing. The expensive wine might have complex flavors and prestigious origins, but your capacity to enjoy your own drink depends mainly on your presence and gratitude, not on the beverage's cost or sophistication. Marcus Aurelius demonstrated this principle throughout his life, moving seamlessly between the luxuries available to a Roman emperor and the austere conditions of military campaigns. His personal writings reveal someone who could appreciate fine food when it was available without missing it when circumstances required simple rations, who could enjoy comfortable accommodations without being disturbed by sleeping in a tent when duties demanded it. The practical development of this capacity involves what you might think of as attention training. Instead of focusing on what's missing from your current situation, you deliberately direct your awareness toward what's actually present and available for appreciation. This shift in focus doesn't require lying to yourself about your circumstances or pretending that all experiences are identical in their objective qualities. Seneca taught that this approach to enjoyment actually enhances rather than diminishes your appreciation of special experiences when they do occur. When you don't need luxury in order to be satisfied, encountering it becomes a delightful bonus rather than a temporary relief from underlying dissatisfaction. When you can find genuine pleasure in simple experiences, elaborate ones become even more remarkable by contrast. Consequently, the next time you feel that your current circumstances are inadequate compared to what others have or what you imagine you need, remember that your capacity for satisfaction exists independently of external conditions. True enjoyment comes from bringing full appreciation to whatever you're actually experiencing, creating richness and fulfillment that no external circumstance can provide or take away. 10. The injustice you commit by doing nothing. You're walking through your neighborhood when you witness a situation that makes you uncomfortable. An elderly man has fallen on the sidewalk and is struggling to get up, while several people walk past without stopping to help. Your first instinct is to assist, but then you hesitate. You're already running late for an appointment, you don't want to get involved in something complicated, and surely someone else will help. You convince yourself that it's not really your responsibility and continue walking, feeling a nagging sense of unease that you try to dismiss. This everyday scenario illuminates one of the most challenging aspects of Stoic philosophy, the recognition that virtue often requires action, not just good intentions or proper thinking. The Stoics understood something about moral responsibility that makes many people uncomfortable. There are situations where choosing not to act is itself a form of wrongdoing, regardless of whether you directly caused the problem or have any official obligation to solve it. Marcus Aurelius captured this principle when he wrote, "Often injustice lies in what you aren't doing, not only in what you are doing." This insight challenges the common assumption that as long as you're not actively harming others, you're fulfilling your moral obligations. The Stoics recognized that this passive approach to ethics ignores the interconnected nature of human communities and our shared responsibility for collective well-being. Understanding why an action can constitute injustice requires grasping how individual choices ripple through social systems in ways that might not be immediately visible. When you choose not to help the fallen elderly man, you're not just making a decision about one isolated incident. You're contributing to a social environment where people in need cannot rely on mutual assistance from community members, where vulnerability becomes more dangerous because help is less likely to be available. This principle operates at multiple levels simultaneously. At the immediate level, your inaction means one specific person remains in a potentially dangerous situation longer than necessary. At the social level, Your choice reinforces a pattern of behavior where individual convenience takes precedence over collective responsibility. At the moral level, you've prioritized your own minor inconvenience over another person's significant need, which violates the Stoic principle that rational beings should work for the common good. The complexity of this teaching becomes apparent when you consider how it applies to larger social issues. Imagine you become aware that your company is engaging in practices that harm the environment or exploit workers, but speaking up might jeopardize your job security. Your initial response might be to rationalize that you didn't create these policies, you're not directly responsible for implementing them, and challenging them exceeds your role and authority. The Stoic understanding of justice recognizes that while you didn't create the harmful policies, your continued participation without objection makes you complicit in their continuation. Your silence becomes a form of consent that enables injustice to persist. This doesn't mean you're equally culpable with those who designed and implemented the harmful practices, but it does mean you bear some moral responsibility for their ongoing effects. Epictetus, who experienced slavery firsthand and understood powerlessness intimately, taught that even people with limited formal authority retain significant moral agency through their choices about when and how to act. He emphasized that you always have options for expressing your values, even in constrained circumstances, and that failing to exercise these options when opportunities arise diminishes your character and contributes to systemic problems. This teaching requires distinguishing between situations where action is genuinely impossible or inappropriate and situations where action is possible but inconvenient, risky, or outside your comfort zone. The elderly man scenario represents a clear case where meaningful help is within your capability, the need is obvious, and the cost to you is minimal compared to the benefit you could provide. More complex situations require careful judgment about what constitutes appropriate action. If you witness workplace discrimination, your options might include documenting incidents, supporting affected colleagues, reporting problems through proper channels, or seeking advice from ethical authorities. The specific action matters less than recognizing that complete inaction makes you partially responsible for allowing harmful patterns to continue. Seneca, who navigated the treacherous world of Roman politics while maintaining his philosophical principles, understood that this approach to justice sometimes requires personal sacrifice. He taught that character development necessarily involves situations where doing the right thing conflicts with immediate self-interest, and that choosing virtue in these moments strengthens both individual integrity and social fabric. The practical application of this wisdom involves developing sensitivity to situations where your action or inaction has moral significance beyond its immediate personal consequences. This means paying attention to opportunities to help individuals in need, speaking up against harmful practices, supporting positive community initiatives, or challenging systems that create unnecessary suffering for vulnerable people. Ultimately, the injustice of doing nothing stems from failing to recognize that your choices always occur within webs of relationship and responsibility that extend beyond your individual concerns. When you choose action guided by virtue and justice, you contribute to creating communities where mutual support and ethical behavior become more common and reliable. Your daily practice for staying calm starts now. You've just discovered 10 powerful practices that have guided people through life's most challenging moments for over 2,000 years. From Marcus Aurelius writing by candlelight during military campaigns to Epictetus teaching students while recovering from the trauma of slavery, these tools have proven their worth in circumstances far more difficult than most of us will ever face. Think back to that overwhelming feeling we started with, lying awake at night, consumed by worries that seem too large and interconnected to manage. Now you understand that overwhelm comes not from having too many problems, but from trying to solve all your problems simultaneously instead of focusing on the one choice that's actually available to you right now. You've learned that staying calm isn't about eliminating life's challenges, but about developing an unshakable foundation that remains steady regardless of external storms. The beauty of these Stoic practices lies in their immediate accessibility. You don't need to wait for perfect conditions, complete understanding, or ideal circumstances to begin implementing them. Tomorrow morning, you can guarantee yourself a good day by choosing to do good, regardless of how others behave. You can maintain your character as your one unchanging job, even when everything around you feels chaotic. You can access that unbreakable part of yourself that no criticism, setback, or disappointment can touch. When change inevitably arrives in your life, and it will, you now understand why fighting it creates suffering while flowing with it opens possibilities you couldn't have imagined. You possess the superpower of strategic silence, allowing wisdom to emerge from the space between stimulus and response. You've discovered how to become truly invincible by focusing exclusively on what's actually within your control, while recognizing that your well-being connects intimately with the well-being of everyone around you. Perhaps most importantly, you've learned that staying calm during overwhelming times isn't about passive acceptance or emotional numbness. It's about present moment focus that transforms impossible situations into manageable realities, simple living that finds genuine enjoyment without dependency, and the courage to take action when justice requires it, even when inaction would be more convenient. These aren't just philosophical concepts to admire from a distance. They're practical tools for daily living that become stronger and more natural with regular use. Start small, perhaps with one practice that resonated most strongly with you today. Notice how strategic silence changes your conversations, or how focusing on the present moment dissolves overwhelming feelings, or how doing good creates reliable satisfaction regardless of external circumstances. The ancient Stoics understood that wisdom without application remains merely intellectual curiosity. True transformation happens when you consistently choose virtue over convenience, presence over worry, and action over paralysis in the small moments that make up your daily life. If this ancient wisdom has provided value for your modern challenges, please subscribe to the Stoic Vivu channel for more practical philosophy that helps you navigate life with greater calm and clarity. Like this video if these 10 practices offered insights you can use immediately, and share it with anyone who might benefit from discovering how to stay calm when life gets overwhelming. Your journey toward unshakable inner peace begins with your very next choice.